This story took place many years ago, and now I figure it might be worth it to share, using a throwaway account for reasons that will shortly be apparent. And I am additionally going to be intentionally vague at times. A little bit about me. At a relatively young age, I was diagnosed with conduct disorder, which in my case was a nice way of saying I exhibit sociopathic traits. Antisocial personality disorder was the final diagnosis. I was in my teens at the time, after being treated with anxiety disorder and ADHD, and it unfortunately didn't happen after a run-in with the law. As a result, I would spend the next 20 years in therapy, first as part of a court order, and then just as a habit. I must admit, it's somewhat enjoyable to be able to be completely open and not have to censor myself or lie and pretend to be someone. The odd thing is, I was in therapy during the time where the dominant paradigm was that sociopaths were made and psychopaths were born. But my parents weren't abusive. I didn't suffer at the hands of my siblings, and nothing I can think of from my peers stood out as particularly extreme experience of bullying that the average person wouldn't be subjected to. So I am not sure why I am the way I am. I am not a particularly violent person, and I do have conscience and empathy, though both are heavily stunted, and I can switch them off at will if needed. Things that make me tear up in private won't even cause a muscle twitch if I'm in public, and the list of things that can do so in private have rapidly decreased as I age, unless I'm extremely drunk, and I do have what you would call a fear response, but as far as I can tell, it manifests differently than it does for normal people. It's purely a physiological thing, where I feel a full effect of adrenaline release into my system and become more concentrated and aware of my surroundings. It's actually quite the high, and I enjoy it. There's more to it than this, obviously. For example, I don't understand people who grieve the dead. I have never cried at a funeral or when one of my pets died, but that should paint enough of a picture of who I am. These traits of mine have given me, to my understanding, certain advantages in life, but most are beyond the scope of this story. As a final personal note, I should mention that I lost my first girlfriend at age 19 because 3 months into our relationship, I cheated on her with some girl I had met just out on the street. Never even got her name. We talked a little bit. I was on my game that day and invited her back to my place to have a drink. After I had excess with her, I was laying there and suddenly imagined my girlfriend walking in at that very moment, just thinking about the look on her face. Then I thought about how I would feel if I walk in on her, unclothed in bed with another guy. At the moment, I realized I had effed up, and I quickly got the other girl to get dressed and leave. What was worst, she was super nice about it and told me I should see about getting a therapy for excess addiction, not in a spiteful way, which actually made me feel sort of bad. I came clean to my girlfriend, and she dumped me, of course. But I always remember the thought I had after cheating and realized that I didn't want to do that to another person. To this day, I stand by this. This will be important later. So enter college. Unfortunately, due to the legal strictures imposed on me in my youth, I didn't get to attend until I turned 21, as I was on papers up until this point. There are more circumstances that helped with the delay, but that was the primary one. So here I am, 3 years older than the other freshmen, living off campus. As a creature of habit, my previous years had turned me into quite a homebody. I made a few friends, but didn't really have any romantic connection for years. I hooked up here and there, as one does, but on the whole, I was fairly alone. Enter my first real serious relationship, a girl I met on Tinder. We will call her Anna. Anna and I met up right after my roommates had moved out of my apartment. I had a 2-bedroom place for $500 a month, which was cheap even for the time, especially considering they allowed pets. Anna was looking for a place to stay, and I happened to have a room available for an incredible price. So I showed it to her. On our first date, I told her I would give her a tour of the room she would be staying in, and we spent the day in my room. Ultimately, turned out I was telling the truth. Now, Anna told me a few things about herself after we started dating. Turns out, her father owned a fairly successful business and gave her some money each month for living expenses. What a deal that was! I was working a tech support job at the time that had been exciting at first, but was beginning to wear on me. Oddly enough, this happened with every job I get, so I put in for an indefinite leave that involved a few white lies, and she and I essentially became unemployed, with a monthly stipend to get us by. This was the state of things for over a year, and those were the good times. We ended up getting a dog together, and I love that furry little bastard more than any person alive. He's still with me to this day, though he's much older now and on his last leg, but I am hopeful he will last the year at least. Anna gets her own car, so now we have two, but things started to fall apart when the police came by one day and asked to speak with her. She left with them early in the morning. They knocked at the door. She answered it, came in and told me the police wanted to talk to her about something, and left. After a few hours, I still hadn't heard from her. I tried calling her phone, and it went unanswered. Finally, in the early afternoon, I got a phone call from the county jail, played the collect call message and everything, and provided her name as the one calling. Turns out she hadn't been given a monthly stipend from her dad every month. She just knew his account information and was accessing it without his knowledge or consent. And he filed a police report when he found out. She was being charged with misdemeanor fraud. She wanted me to bail her out. Okay, fine. I had done a stint in prison before, and I knew it wasn't fun. So I went through the process of finding a bail bondsman, using what cash reserve we had to deal with him, and getting her out. The whole thing was long and painful, and now she had to show up to court on a set date, and she had lost her job in the interim, even though she was only in there for about 4 days. So without an income source, I went back to my prior job and was fortunate that they were glad to hire me back. The timing almost couldn't have been better. They were just about ready to look for some new hire and had a project I could work on until they were actually ready. So I began to work pretty much the next week. Money problems solved. Of course, I also took the graveyard shift because it paid slightly better. I had to sleep during the day now, and our time together was cut into as a result, but it made things workable. Unfortunately, Anna now had too much time on her hands. She would often walk our dog around the neighborhood just to get out of the house. That's how she met Steve. Steve was a guy who lived a couple of neighborhoods away and had a dog of his own. He would go running with his dog a few miles every few days, and on one of these days, he happened to cross paths with Anna. To this day, I don't know exactly how it happened, and I don't exactly care either, but they become, shall we say, fast friends. Steve smoked weed. Anna also smoked weed. I didn't, not out of any sort of principle, but because I didn't like how it made me feel. Unless I was commensurately drunk, it always gave me what one might call a bad trip. I am talking hallucination and full-on dissociation. I am not sure if it has anything to do with my sociopathic tendencies, but I do know that I don't like the stuff, but I am fine with others partaking. Suddenly, within a few weeks, Anna and Steve are spending a lot more time together. Steve doesn't have a car, so Anna drives him to his job because that's what friends do. This is when I started noticing red flags, though I didn't realize how common they are among cheaters at the time. Anna starts fighting with me over small comments, even things that are hard to interpret as anything other than a joke. Things like, think movie quotes, and you will get an idea. Little things I do begin to annoy her that previously she loved. Her phone becomes glued to her hand, and she seemed to think typing away under a blanket means she's being subtle. Her lock screen password has been changed. Here's the thing. Remember my tech support job? Yeah, I am actually very good with computers. Anna is not, so I help her set up her phone. I set up and maintain all the equipment for internet and Wi-Fi. The whole apartment network was built by me. So what do? I got into investigative mode. First, suddenly got her new phone passcode. It takes me a few trials since she was somewhat aware of me. but I eventually see over her shoulder once when she unlocked her phone. Next, I used Wireshark to start watching network traffic on my wireless network. This seems like a good middle ground until I can actually get access to her phone. And third, I install a keylogger on our shared computer and get the password to her email address and social media accounts. Facebook and its messaging service were in widespread use by this time. Now, here is where things get interesting. I checked her email. Turns out I didn't even need to log in. She failed to log out after her last use and find a sent email to a different friend of hers mentioning how they ran into Anna and Steve at Walmart a week back and talking about how Steve was hot. Odd. So I end up asking her about it, saying that I was auditing our wireless network for intrusion attempt and saw she sent that email because she didn't encrypt it. She got defensive at first, saying that I should have told her if I was going to spy on the internet. I said I didn't think I had any need to at the time, and again asked her about the email. She said I should have come to her without jumping to conclusion or accusing her of something. I calmly pointed out that I was doing exactly that. After I said that, she forced herself to calm down and said she really meant me, not Steve, and just hadn't read the email closely. Seems plausible on the surface, since Steve's name had only come up once and it was her friend who said it. So I openly accepted this information and asked that she just correct the misunderstanding with her friend, which she did right in front of me to prove she was doing it. I didn't bother pointing out how empty a gesture this was, how immediately defensive wasn't the only red flag she had been displaying, or that she and I hadn't run into any of her friends while out and about lately. Cue a few weeks later, I'm still trying to find a good time to get access to her phone, and she tells me she's going to visit her family in the city about 2 hours over the weekend. I can't go because I have work. She's fine with this, of course. I see her off, then goes back to the computer and check her account. Nothing immediately jumps out as far as messaging or emails, but I do find a search history, a bed and breakfast in the area she said she was going to go. How odd that someone who was going to visit family would be looking up hotels. She's silent the entire weekend. No phone call, no text, no nothing. When she came back, she's in tears, saying she's sorry she went off the grid, but her family had her committed over the weekend, saying that they were afraid she would self-delete herself, but she thinks they just wanted to punish her more for stealing money from them. So I hugged her, tell her it's okay, it's not her fault, I still love her, and etc. If she's going to lie to my face, I will respond in kind, but this seems to put her at ease. And soon after I get my chance at her phone, she falls asleep while watching something, and her phone was left on the charger. Perfect. So I disconnect the phone, walked into the other room, unlock it, and go through her messages. What I found wasn't surprising in the least. She had long text conversation with Steve, saying she loves him, calling him the same pet name she calls me, all that stuff. I scrolled up to the weekend she was committed and carefully going back through the history. Sure enough, there it is. They planned on spending the weekend together at the bed and breakfast she looked up, leaving me alone to take care of the dog and wonder if she's even alive, why she had excess with another man. This was when I had an epiphany that I have never come back from. Wouldn't be much of an epiphany if I had. That feeling of not wanting to hurt someone by cheating on them that I, a diagnosed sociopath, had when I lost my first girlfriend due to cheating on her. The realization that I had effed up and the decision to come clean immediately. Anna didn't have that. I want you to think about that for a moment and the implication it would have for me personally. So what did I do? Go in there, tell her I knew everything, and break up with her in an epic relationship-ending fight? No, I didn't do a thing. I went back into the bedroom, plugged her phone back in, climbed next to her, and kept watching the show. Well, that's not true. I plotted. She woke up and I smiled, kissed her, and acted like nothing was wrong. I had flipped the switch. She wasn't my girlfriend anymore. She just didn't know that I knew it. For the next 3 days, I acted completely fine whenever she was around. But I had a plan. After thinking about it while she slept, I knew she would go to Steve's house to smoke weed. At the time, in my state, possession of weed was a big no-no. You face 6 months in jail for having it, and the police had testing kits that they would use in the field, or whatever you call it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't know where Steve lived, but I had a rough idea. Anna would take her car to visit him. I would wait for her to leave, then take my own car and canvass the area until I found where she was, and by extension, where the two of them were smoking weed. Anna mentioned Steve was in a house, not an apartment, so this seems like a viable way to track her down. Then I would go knock on the neighbors' doors until I would get someone to let me use their phone, call the police, and leave a tip that I had seen someone driving erratically through the neighborhood as if under the influence, then followed them to his address, where I saw them get out to their weird-looking pipe. Now enter the story, Caitlin. Caitlin was my neighbor and a friend, and she helped me get my apartment. Caitlin and I had been flirtatious early on, but she had gotten a boyfriend, and I then started dating Anna. Well, Caitlin was single now, so I had gone over to her place and shared my woe over drinks and mentioned my plan. Having gotten strong evidence of Anna's cheating, Caitlin was somewhat surprised, to say the least. She also smoked and said that while she didn't approve of weed laws, she couldn't really blame me for using them this way to get back at Anna, but she urged me to dump Anna and get it over with because my current living conditions were unhealthy. I didn't really explain to her why it was easy for me, but it did cause me to consider something I had missed. If Anna and Steve both get arrested, who is she going to call? Probably the guy that bailed her out the last time. We can't have that now, can we? Besides, this might be a rare circumstance where I can have my cake and eat it too, and benefits in the end. Why I briefly considered letting her call me and telling me I knew everything then, I would also be paying for the call, which wasn't worth it. I stayed talking to Caitlin when Anna came home. Since we were neighbors, I saw her car drive by my apartment. I decided to take her advice. I went to confront Anna straight away. I have to say, I have never had so much fun dismantling a person. I wish I had known about common cheater refrains before, so I could be better prepared, but I enjoyed it. I told her I knew she was cheating and she wasn't going to live with me anymore, starting immediately. She denied it at first, but I had evidence. Then she yelled at me that I was crazy, and I screamed back that if I were crazy, she should be glad to get out of the apartment and away from me. She said she loved me and begged me not to throw us away. I said she did that already, and there was nothing for me to throw away. But in spite of everything, she never admitted to cheating. Fine, I didn't really need her to, anyway. So eventually, she storms out. I head back to Caitlin for a bit. We talked, and I asked her what her plans are for the night. She doesn't have any. I mentioned my night is open, but I had to take care of one last thing first. She tried for a moment to talk me out of it, but I say I have my reasons, and promised to grab some hard liquor on my way back. Then I'm all hers for the rest of the night. I leave my phone in my apartment and head to the neighborhood I know Steve lives in. I drive up and down the streets, and before long, I spot Anna's car. I made a note of the house she parked at. It's in the driveway, which is good. I will be less sure if it was on the street. I parked a little down the road, then I walked back and start knocking on doors. The first neighbor isn't comfortable letting me borrow their phone. The second one is, but insists on standing there. I pretty much followed my planned dialogue, but added that I followed the car from a couple of streets away because they sideswiped me while they were drifting, and made sure I mentioned that the two passengers got out. They were both walking funny. They asked for their address and said an officer would be there shortly and requested that I wait nearby to give a statement. I said sure. I did wait nearby but I didn't want to talk to the police or get directly involved in any way. So I just stayed in my car as far as I could while still seeing the house. Minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up to Steve's house and walked to it. I waited with bated breath. Nothing else happened for close to half an hour. Then both Steve and Anna was brought out in handcuffs. I still remember the rush of euphoria I got from that scene. I couldn't see her face, but I like to think she was crying. After the police left with Steve and Anna in tow, I went to the store, got the nicest whiskey bottle I could find, and went back to Caitlin. She asked me how it went, and I told her it went as well as I could have hoped. We spent the night drinking, watching Netflix, playing games, and ultimately slept together. Turned a horrible night into one of my better ones. I didn't really do much follow-up with Steve and Anna. I just kept an eye on their cases as much as was publicly available. I saw they were booked and what the charges were. I don't know what their ultimate sentences was, but Steve was facing up to 6 months easily, and Anna could face over a year with the drug and fraud charges combined. And I still had my dog. Caitlin and I didn't really work out long term, and we never got serious. She ended up moving out of state a few months later, and I lost contact with her. After my own lease was up, I also moved. I never had to see Anna again. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of a trend of always being cheated on, which has made it hard for me to give a SHT about people, something that's already more difficult for me. This was the first though, and the one where I feel I really wound up better off immediately afterwards. But every time after this, it didn't hurt when I get cheated on. It got me excited, because most of the time, I have to play in your world. When you cheat on me, that's when we're playing in mine, and I'm going to be so much better at it than you are. So here's my reaction. Well, the original poster is not only sociopathic, he also lacks the ability to pick decent girlfriends. That is why all his girlfriends have been cheating on him. See, Anna lied to him about getting money from her father, and even when he found out that she lied to him and was stealing from her father, he still bailed her out. So she didn't only betray her father, she betrayed him too. But he lacks the ability to judge character. If she lies to her father, what did he expect her to do to him? So he still lived with her, he still slept with her, even though he knew she lied to him and she lied to her family, and she's a thief. So can't really judge her for that because she knows who she is. So this story is more about an expose on the original poster, not really his girlfriend, because she's already a proven criminal. And the sad story here is the original poster is blaming women for cheating on him, why he is the person that's picking these terrible women, even though he knows that the women are terrible. He continues to stay with them in the relationship till they cheat on him. And then he acts surprised. I think he's a bit delusional, thinking that he's playing a game. He's playing a game with himself and wasting his time. If a girl shows you who she is, believe her. If she steals from her family, believe her. She's a thief, she's a liar. It's not a very far stretch from being a thief to being a cheater. So if a girl will lie to her family, steal from her family, she's definitely going to cheat. So the moral of the story is, if somebody shows you who they are, you believe them and get out of that relationship, instead of blaming them when they actually do what they already showed you that they would do. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please hit the like button so the algorithm will promote this video. Thank you very much and have a very good day.